Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about decimals and just kind of a little bit of an introduction to decimals, ordering decimals, some place value stuff, and converting between fractions and decimals. So first let's look at some main decimals and fractions on the number line. So these are kind of the fractions and decimals that we see, I'd say, most commonly. So the decimal 0.25, which is read 25 hundredths, that is the same as the fraction of 1/4. Sometimes I remember that is because 25 cents is a quarter. 1/4 in a dollar is 25 cents. So 5/10, that is a half. That one is probably pretty, you probably know that one pretty well. 0.75 read as 75 hundredths, that's 3/4. Kind of like 3/4 is 75 cents. 3/4 of a dollar, 75 hundredths is a decimal. The other common one is thirds. So 1/3 is the decimal 0.3 and it repeats. So if you look at 1/3 as a decimal, it goes on forever, 0.3 repeating. So remember, we use the line above the number to represent that number repeats in the decimal. 2/3 is 0.6 repeating. And if you compare these two number lines, you can see that 1/3 is just a little bit bigger than 1/4, and 2/3 is just a little bit less than 3/4. And then the decimals are, you can kind of compare the decimals as well. The other fractions I have on here are fifths. Fifths for me are easy to remember because 1/5 is the same thing as 2/10, simplified, and 2/10 as a decimal is 0.2. 2/5 is the same thing as 4/10, and that would be 0.4. 4/10. So this would be 6/10, 0.6. 4/5 is the same thing as 8/10, which would be 0.8. So tenths and fifths are easy to remember that way. Let's practice putting some numbers on the number line. First thing I'm going to look at is the smallest and largest number. So the smallest number would be 0.05. That's our smallest. And then our largest, since A, C, D, and E all start with 0 point, the largest number is going to be 1.2. So that means that I need to go from 0, and then I have to have 1 on there as well, and maybe I'll go up to 2. I like to then put in maybe my 0.5 and 1.5. That would help me to place these other values, because now if I put A, 0.42, I'm going to look at the tens place as 4, which is just a little bit lower than 0.5. So that would be approximately like right here, 0.42. 1.2, if I think about that, if I divide 1 and 2 into a half and then a half again, well, this is 1.25 then, that's a fourth, and this would be 1.75. So 1.2 would be just a little bit less than that quarter. So that would be approximately where B is. 0.69, remember halfway between 0.5 and 1 is 0.75. So 0.69 is going to be just a little bit less than 0.75 and a little bit more than 0.5. So that's where I would estimate C to be. D, 0.05, it's 0/10 and 5/100. So 5/100 is a very small number, and it's going to be really close to 0 then. So 0.5 would be down here. Actually, it might even be closer than that to 0. So pretty close to 0. It's a very small number because it has the 0 in the tenths place. And then 0.15, again, is small, but just a little bit bigger than 0.15. That's 15 hundredths. Between 0.5 and 0 would be 0.25. So 0.15 would be right about there. So ordering our decimals. So from smallest to largest, we have 0.05, and then it was 0.15, and then 0.42, 0.69, and finally 1.2. So if you notice, when I ordered them, I like to look at the zeros here first, meaning that one is bigger than the ones with the zeros, and then the next place I looked at was the tenths place, and I compared those. All right, how to convert a fraction to a decimal, and we can use a calculator as needed. So I'm going to show you how to do it by hand, and then I'll show you how to enter it in the calculator to check as well. 3/5 to convert this fraction to a decimal, you will take 3 divided by 5. Now, how many times does 5 fit into 3? It doesn't, 0 times. So now we need to add a decimal place and a 0. So we're going to move that decimal straight up. Now, how many times does 5 fit into 30? Well, it fits in 6 times. 5 times 6 is 30. So if I subtract, I get a remainder of 0. So 3/5 is the decimal 0.6. 1/3. You do 1 divided by 3. Again, 3 does not fit into 1, 0 times. So I'm going to add the decimal and a 0. How many times does 3 fit into 10? It fits in there 3 times. 3, 6, 9. Subtract 10 minus 9 is 1. Okay. Then I'm going to bring down another 0. 3 fits into 10 3 times. That's 9. Subtract, I get 1. I can add a 0 and bring it down again. And you can see that this pattern is going to continue. 3 fits into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract. And it's going to keep going like that forever. So I'm going to continue to get 0.33333. So 1/3 is 0.3 repeating. 5/8. So you're going to do 5. Oh, what happened to my pen? 5 divided by 8. I gotta plug my pen back in. Let me show you how you do that on the calculator quick then. So to do 5/8, you would do 5, and then use the divide key to make the fraction divided by 8. It might look a little different in your calculator if it leaves it as the division, but that'll give you your decimal. So 0.625. So 5/8 then. So 5. Uh-oh, it's freezing up on me. Sorry about that. Five divided by 8. There we go. 8 does not fit into 5. Add a 0 and a decimal. Whoops. Not a 0 there. 8 goes into 50. Well, 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48. So it fits in there 6 times. So then take 48 and subtract. 50 minus 48 is 2. Then we can add a 0 and bring it down. 8 goes into 20. Oh, not quite 3 times. It'd be 8 times 2 is 16. So it only fits in there 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16. Subtract. 20 minus 16 is 4. Take another 0 and bring it down. And then 8 goes into 40 5 times. 8 times 5 is 40. We get to 0. So there's no remainder. That is our final answer, 0.625. which we saw with the calculator. Now going backwards, converting each decimal to a fraction using place value. So that's where we needed to remember our decimal points. So we had, the ones and the tens place, and then the decimal, and then you have the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, etc. in the decimal place. So if I had like 1.3, that's 1 3/10. So here, this is in the tenths place. So that reads as 4/10, which means it's 4/10. That can be simplified because I know that I can rewrite 4 as 2 times 2, and I can rewrite 10 as 5 times 2. So I can take out a factor of 2 from each, and so it simplifies to 2/5. The second place value, tenths, and then hundredths. So this is 55 hundredths, so 55 over 100. Now I can simplify that because I know 55 is 11 times 5, and 100 is 20 times 5. So a factor of 5 can come out of each. So 11 over 20. Now 11's prime, so that's as far as I can simplify. 12, the 2 is in the hundredths place, so this is 12 hundredths. Let's see, we can simplify this one by 2 to start. 12 is 6 times 2, and 100 is 50 times 2, so I can take out a factor of 2, 6 over 50. But then I know I can reduce that by 2 again, because 6 is 3 times 2, and 50 is 25 times 2, so take out another 2, and it reduces to 3 over 25. All right, the last thing we're going to look at is rounding to the indicated place value. So to the nearest tenth, that means 1 decimal place. So you look at the 2 right here, the first decimal place. You look at the number behind it. If it is 5 or more, we round up. 4 or less, we leave it. Okay? So following the 2, there is a 5. So we round the 2 up, so it'll be 0.3. To the nearest hundredth, that's the second place value. So you look at the number behind it. Here is a 3, so that means you do not round, you just leave it as 0.26. You do not change the 6 to a 7 because it's followed by a 3. The nearest tenth is the first decimal place again, so look at the following digit as a 7, which means I want to round up, so it'd be 0.7. The 6 goes up to 7. Thousandths, it goes tenths, hundredths, thousandths, so that's the third decimal place. I look at the number following it is a 3. So 4 or less, you let it rest is the saying, or you leave it. So 1.261. When it's a 3 or less, or 4 or less, you just cut it off and leave it as it is. If it's 5 or more, you round the number up. Okay, let me know if you have questions. There's a few for you to try on your own. I'll take a look at this when you're done, and we will talk about it when I see you in class. Don't forget to share it back to me and drop it in the assignment when